Welcome, chickens, to another episode of Chickabiddy Audiobooks, where you can listen to free public domain works and original audio content. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel so I can bring you more listening material. Today I'll be reading Aspenclog, The Troll Wedding, and The Hat of Huldres as they appear in the Norwegian Fairy Book by Clara Strobe and translated by Frederick Herman Martens. The Norwegian Fairy Book is in the public domain. You can find a link to the full text in the description below if you'd like to follow along. Aspenclog. Aspenclog's mother was an aspen tree. He slew the man who had chopped her down. Then he went to the king and asked whether he could give him work. He wanted no other pay than the right to give the king 3 good thumps on the back when there was no more work for him to do. The king agreed to this condition, for he thought he would always have enough work for him to do. Then he sent him to the forest to gather wood. But Aspenclog piled up such a tremendous load that 2 horses could not pull the wagon. So he took 2 polar bears, harnessed them to the wagon, and drove it home, and left the bears in the stable where they ate up all the king's cattle. Then he was told to keep a mill grinding, which the evil one often brought to a stop. No sooner had Aspenclog commenced to grind than, sure enough, the mill stopped. Aspenclog took a candle and made a search. No doubt of it, the evil one had wedged his leg between the millstones. No sooner had Aspenclog seen the leg than he chopped it off with his club. Then the evil one came hobbling up on one leg and begged fearfully and tearfully for the leg he had lost. No, he could not have it, said the youth, unless he gave him a bushel of money for it. But when the evil one had to pay Aspenclog the money, he thought to cheat him, and said that they would wager bushel against bushel, as to which one of them could throw the highest. They argued a while about which was to throw first. At last Aspenclog had to begin. Now the evil one had a ball with which they were to throw. Aspenclog stood a long time looking at the moon. "Why do you do that?" asked the evil one. "Well, I would like to see whether I cannot throw the ball into the moon," said Aspenclog. "Do you see those black spots? Those are the balls I have already thrown up into the moon." Then the evil one was afraid of losing his ball, and he did not dare to let Aspenclog throw. So they wagered bushel against bushel as to which one of them could blow the highest note. "You may blow first," said Aspenclog. "No, you." Finally it was decided that Aspenclog should blow first. Then he went to a hill, took an enormous fir tree, and wound it around his horn like a reed. "Why do you do that?" asked the evil one. "Well, if I don't, the horn will burst when I blow it," was Aspenclog's answer. Now the evil one began to get frightened, and Aspenclog came home with half a ton of money. But soon the king had no corn left to grind, and war broke out in the land. "Now he will have to work enough to last him a lifetime," thought the king, and he told Aspenclog to go out against the enemy. Aspenclog was quite ready to do so, but wanted to have plenty of provisions to take with him. Then he set forth, and when he saw the enemy he sat down to eat. The enemy shot at him as hard as they could, but their bullets did not touch him. When Aspenclog had satisfied his hunger, he stood up, tore out an enormous oak by the roots, and lay about him with it. Before very long he had hewn down all the enemy. Then he went back home to the king. "Have you any more work for me?" he asked. "No, now I have no work left," said the king. "Then I will give you 3 good thumps on the back," said Aspenclog. The king begged permission to bolster himself up with pillows. "Yes, take as many as you want," said Aspenclog. Then he thumped, and at his first thump the king burst into pieces. The Troll Wedding. One summer, a long, long time ago, the folk of Melbustad went up to the hill pastures with their herd. But they had been there only a short time when the cattle began to grow so restless that it was impossible to keep them in order. A number of different maidens tried to manage them, but without avail, until one came who was betrothed, and whose betrothal had but recently been celebrated. Then the cattle suddenly quieted down and were easy to handle. So the maiden remained alone in the hills with no other company than a dog. And one afternoon, as she sat in the hut, it seemed to her that her sweetheart came, sat down beside her, and began to talk about their getting married at once. But she sat still and made no reply, for she noticed a strangeness about him. By and by more and more people came in, and they began to cover the table with silverware and bring on dishes, and the bridesmaids brought the bridal crown, and the ornaments, and a handsome bridal gown, and they dressed her, and put the crown on her head, as was the custom in those days, and they put rings on her hands. And it seemed to her as though she knew all the people who were there. They were the women of the village, and the girls of her own age. But the dog was well aware that there was something uncanny about it all. He made his way down to Melbustad in flying leaps, and howled and barked in the most lamentable manner, and gave the people no rest until they followed him. The young fellow who was to marry the girl took his gun and climbed the hills, and when he drew near, there stood a number of horses around the hut, saddled and bridled. He crept up to the hut, looked through a loophole in the wall, and saw a whole company sitting together inside. It was quite evident that they were trolls, the people from the underground, and therefore he discharged his gun over the roof. At that moment the doors flew open, and a number of balls of grey yarn, one larger than the other, came shooting out about his legs. When he went in, there sat the maiden in her bridal finery, and nothing was missing but the ring on her little finger. Then all would have been complete. "In heaven's name, what has happened here?" he asked, as he looked around. All the silverware was still on the table, but all the tasty dishes had turned to moss and toadstools and frogs and toads and the like. "What does it all mean?" said he. "You are sitting here in all your glory, just like a bride?" "How can you ask me?" answered the maiden. "You have been sitting here yourself and talking about our wedding the whole afternoon." "No, I have just come," said he. "It must have been someone else who had taken my shape." Then she gradually came to her senses, but not until long afterward was she altogether herself, and she told how she had firmly believed that her sweetheart himself and all their friends and relatives had been there. He took her straight back to the village with him, and so that they need fear no such deviltry in the future, they celebrated their wedding while she was still clad in the bridal outfit of the underground folk. The crown and all the ornaments were hung up in Melbustad, and it is said that they hang there to this very day. The Hat of Huldres. Once upon a time there was a big wedding at a certain farmstead, and a certain cottager was on his way to the wedding feast. As he chanced to cross a field, he found a milk strainer, such as are usually made of cows' tails, and looking just like an old brown rag. He picked it up, for he thought it could be washed, and then he would give it to his wife for a dish rag. But when he came to the house where they were celebrating the wedding, it seemed as though no one saw him. The bride and groom nodded to the rest of the guests. They spoke to them and poured for them, but he got neither greeting nor drink. Then the chief cook came and asked the other folk to sit down to the table, but he was not asked, nor did he get anything to eat, for he did not care to sit down of his own accord when no one had asked him. At last he grew angry and thought, "I might as well go home, for not a soul pays a bit of attention to me here." When he reached home, he said, "Good evening, here I am back again." "For heaven's sake, are you back again?" asked his wife. "Yes. There is no one there who paid any attention to me, or even so much as looked at me," said the man, "and when people show me so little consideration, it seems as though I have nothing to look for there." "But where are you? I can hear you, but I cannot see you," cried his wife. The man was invisible, for what he had found was a Huldre hat. "What are you talking about? Can't you see me? Have you lost your wits?" asked the man. "There is an old hair strainer for you. I found it outside on the ground," said he, and he threw it on the bench. And then his wife saw him, but at the same moment the Hat of Huldres disappeared, for he should only have loaned it, not given it away. Now the man saw how everything had come about, and went back to the wedding feast. And this time he was received in right friendly fashion, and was asked to drink and to seat himself at the table. Thank you for being here today. If you enjoyed this audio rendition, please like and subscribe. Comment below any thoughts you had on the story, or if you have suggestions about other audiobooks you'd like to hear from the public domain. Jigabiddy out.